Apparently the Methodist Hospital organization took it over and converted it into a hospital, which was, it was like 120 beds. It was 6 stories. I think the maximum occupancy would have been 80 to 90 people at any one time. It had one elevator for the 6 floors in the back end of the building, rickety old elevator, and the best way to call the elevator was to just yell up the elevator shaft. Somebody would bring it down or bring it up or whatever you had to do. The salvation of the place was there were some good people there. And Don Carner, who preceded me into the organization by a year and a half or 2 years, had already started bringing in people for Parkview. And that was about the only way you could get somebody to come into the organization, especially from out of town. It was a gee whiz. It was a wow, especially after the old Methodist. Well, anything would have been, you know. But it was well done, and it was well planned. And so it was, well, Methodist Hospital was a distant third in the community. Lutheran and St. Joe kind of struggled for 1 and 2, but there was no question as who was number 3. But with the advent of that new building and the people that came to develop the programs there, many of whom were brought in to do that, it went to number 1. Don was my mentor. I learned more about what hospitals do and what administrators should do from Don than anybody else. And that's one of the reasons I went to Old Methodist Hospital. But anyway, he was the most persistent guy I have ever known. He was a bulldog. And he had a firm belief that for every problem there's a solution. You just have to find it. So Old Methodist didn't faze him. It was New Parkview that he really came here for. And how do we get New Parkview? And so he played a key role in that and in building the staff. And I watched him recruit people to Fort Wayne, to the Old Methodist Hospital, which is a major undertaking, but it's a human relations example that very valuable. And what he taught me, maybe the most important lesson I ever learned, was that it starts with the people. Clyde Cover. Yeah. Well, if this were a football game, he'd get the game ball. A very good lawyer, but he was in the legal department at Lincoln National. And he was criticized for the amount of time he was spending on getting the new hospital built. I mean, you know that corporate politics can be pretty tough, pretty vicious even. And I think he sacrificed some of his career to get the hospital built because he was like Carner. Put those two together and they'd go through that wall without any trouble. They were both just terribly persistent people.
The years following World War II were a boom time for Fort Wayne. Through the 1940s and 50s, the population increased almost 75%, and large suburban areas were annexed, doubling the city's footprint. This was the beginning of the steady growth Fort Wayne and all of Northeast Indiana would see through the rest of the 20th century. In 1953, Parkview Memorial Hospital sat at the edge of a city full of promise. The new, modern hospital, with room to grow into its spacious park-like setting, quickly became the local leader in healthcare. This leadership brought with it higher than anticipated patient volumes, which put pressure on the existing facility. At the same time, Parkview executives and physicians were determined to lead the way in healthcare innovation in the state of Indiana. Stan Nelson, just 28 years old but already 2 years into his role as superintendent of Parkview, announced plans to dramatically expand the hospital and develop the entire campus. The first phase opened in 1958. It featured the addition of 3 floors onto the hospital's west wing. The emergency department capacity was tripled. Physical and occupational therapy also grew to aid those in the community stricken by polio. The heart of the 1958 expansion was the installation of equipment nicknamed the Cobalt Bomb, a radiation therapy machine integral to the future of cancer treatment. 3 years later, in 1961, Nelson left the hospital and was succeeded by Assistant Administrator Mark Slen. Also that year, on the other side of the Parkview campus, Clyde Cover spearheaded the construction of the long-term care unit. This was a new concept in patient care, focused on those who needed more care than their families could provide at home, but not the acute care provided by the hospital. Parkview's growth continued through the 1960s with the addition of 3 floors on the east and south wings and 1 floor on the north wing. The north wing work expanded the maternity unit to accommodate the new desire for more immediate bonding between parents and their newborn. While the mothers were in one of the new private labor rooms, the fathers-to-be still waited in the Stork Club to receive their complimentary cigar upon hearing the news of their baby's arrival. Fathers would be barred from delivery rooms until 1973, but the 1965 improvements allowed them to spend time in the recovery room with the new mothers, and for newborns to stay in their mother's room. For infants who needed extra care, the addition also included a special care nursery. The 1960s also saw the introduction of progressive patient care at Parkview. This approach adjusted nursing care and facilities based on the type of care needed by each patient. With this change in nursing came the need for an intensive care unit for patients requiring the highest concentrations of nursing skill and technology.
When I came back to Parkview in the late 60s, my interest was in ICU, and the first intensive care unit at Parkview was 4 beds. And mostly those were patients from Dr. Manning and Hastings. Those were neuro doctors. And those are the days when they were doing electrode implants into the brain as experimental therapy. So I thought I was really learning a lot. And then I can remember polio days when we had iron lungs in the hospital. And there were no ventilators, so we come a long way over the years. And again, I felt like we were always on the cutting edge and learning more about what was happening in the healthcare field.
These changes also eventually led to a separate cardiac care unit in 1969. In 1970, Parkview saw its last wing expanded with 3 floors added to the south wing. That brought the total number of beds close to 600, nearly 100 more than Dr. E.T. Franklin dreamed of when he bought the land for the hospital almost 30 years earlier. 1970 also saw 12 beds in the long-term care unit converted to an inpatient alcohol treatment facility. This was the first such facility in the state of Indiana to be associated with a community hospital. 2 years later, the decision was made to convert the entire long-term care unit into a full-fledged psychiatric hospital. As the needs of the local community evolved, so did Parkview. A central utility plant was built and expansions were made to the emergency department and to the intensive care nursery, making it the largest in Indiana outside Indianapolis. The lobby was also enlarged as outpatient services such as lab and x-ray gained in popularity. Because more people were using and visiting the hospital, a parking garage was added in 1977. Fort Wayne Mayor Robert Armstrong drove the first car into one of the 425 new parking spaces. Community needs also led to the 1977 opening of the Parkview Regional Oncology Center, just to the east of the main campus. This was the first cancer treatment center in Indiana to feature radiation oncology, medical oncology, lab, and x-ray in the same outpatient center. It was a dramatic leap forward in terms of cancer treatment capability.
Dr. Gastineau kept saying, you know, we need to develop a total concept. He was big in total concept. He always was. He always wanted to make sure that we could make it as easy as we could for the patient. It was, you know, it was going to be the one-stop shop, you know, the pharmacy, the lab, the social worker, even had hospice.
By 1978, Parkview Memorial Hospital had seen a quarter century of uninterrupted growth. Hospital employees had become a family. Some had even been married in the chapel. And that winter, the warmth of these friendships would shine through some of the coldest days on record. On Wednesday, January 25th, a blizzard warning was issued for the region. By the next day, 14 inches of snow had fallen, whipped into drifts as high as 20 feet by 45-mile-an-hour winds. The city of Fort Wayne had shut down, but Parkview did not have that luxury. The storm left the area paralyzed under 17 inches of snow and massive drifts. President Jimmy Carter declared Fort Wayne a disaster area, but at Parkview, the staff, patients, visitors, and neighbors banded together to meet patients' needs.
I think, in hindsight, disasters, whether it be a tornado or a blizzard or a flood, I think bring people together. I never saw the hospital run so smoothly with so many amateurs chipping in, doing every kind of job possible. Nobody complained. I didn't hear complaints from staff, from patients. We had volunteers, both our own as well as neighbor people would call up and say, what can I do to help? You know, if you want me to just bring a shovel over, I'll shovel walks for you. So, you know, help came out of the woodwork. It was really fun. We just, you know, sleeping accommodations, you know, people would sleep all the way from English Hall to surgery to executive lounge, you know, couches and stuff. And I worked in the laundry for 2 days, helping fold sheets. And boy, I said, this is hard work. I said, Mr. Ritterheim, we've been telling you that, you know.
27 blizzard babies were delivered during the storm. Parkview welcomed the 1980s with the largest expansion ever seen at the hospital. Project Junebug, as it was originally called, was a 3-floor addition to the southern end of the hospital, including an expanded central supply and physical and occupational therapy, as well as a 32-bed intensive care unit and a 32-bed cardiac care unit. The ICU and CCU were so advanced that technology in the rooms was invented specifically for them and became a standard for similar units around the country.
First of all, I thought I had worked hard when I was in training at Indiana University. I came here, that was working really hard. There were 3 of us. We were the only pulmonary group and the only pulmonary critical care group in the region. It was John Fouts and Tom Hayhurst and I. And I walked into the ICU, and they taught me very quickly about teamwork in the ICU, something that I still use. And you know, some of the people in Madison are a little sick of hearing my Parkview stories about the ICU nurses and so forth. But they basically, you know, you think about the great group of nurses that were there, and they very quickly made it clear that we could do this the easy way or we could do this the hard way. And they assured me that I was not going to like the hard way. And I saw them administer the hard way to several of my more recalcitrant physician colleagues, and they were right. I definitely would not like the hard way. And so what they taught me was it's all about teamwork, and we treat each other as colleagues, and we all contribute. And of course, the amazing thing about that is, at the same time, they're lifting the weight of the world off my shoulders, because I don't have to have all the answers. We're a team. We can think through together how we're going to do this and trust each other. And the trust and teamwork that was built there, you know, when Kathy Miller or Kathy Harris or Mary Lou Clark, you know, or Kay or Lori or whomever, if they call you and they said, hey, not sure what's wrong with this patient, but you better get over here, you're moving.
It would not be long before the capabilities of this new addition and the resolve of everyone working at the hospital would be put to the test. In the early morning hours of Thursday, May 29, 1980, Vernon Jordan, president of the National Urban League, was shot in the back by a sniper outside his hotel room on the north side of Fort Wayne. An ambulance rushed him to Parkview Hospital, where he was immediately ushered into surgery. Dr. Jeffrey Tolles operated on Jordan for 4.5 hours. After surgery, Jordan was taken to the ICU, and by the end of the day, U.S. Senator Edward Kennedy and civil rights activist Jesse Jackson had come to Parkview to visit him. The following Monday, on the debut broadcast of CNN, the lead story described President Jimmy Carter's visit to Jordan in the hospital.
Stand by, ready 3, take 3, Mike Hewer. 3, start to slow zoom in a little bit. Roll tape, take 3. Ready 13, full. Ready camera 3, 1 center up.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news. President Carter has arrived in Fort Wayne, Indiana for a brief visit with civil rights leader Vernon Jordan. Jordan is in serious but stable condition now at Parkview Hospital. He is recuperating from the gunshot wound suffered early Thursday morning. Police still have no solid lead on who attempted to murder Jordan.
What I remember most about that is when I believe it was Jimmy Carter was president, and he came to visit Vernon Jordan, and I was director of Central Service at that time because we had moved into a new area on the South Wing, and we had a large row of windows, nothing but windows, and they brought him in the back way, which the stairs that he was going to use was right outside of those windows. And then they told us approximately what time they were expecting him. And the girls that were working, and they even called some of them, and they came in. And they all lined up there, and there was pictures in the newspaper of that, where they could see him, and they all waved at Jimmy Carter, and he waved back and acknowledged them.
The hospital's growth continued through the 1980s. Surgery was expanded, a pediatric care unit was opened, and the new Life Center was added to the hospital with large, comfortable private rooms to afford a more family-centered birthing experience. Parkview inaugurated the Lifeline helicopter service from Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, with the first flight landing on the newly installed rooftop helipad in 1982. 7 years later, Parkview launched its own helicopter service. Samaritan, a name suggested by Parkview employees, brought the critically ill and injured to Parkview from throughout the region. Advances in medicine over the years led to many changes in nursing care, which affected nursing education. More students wanted to get training in a university setting. That left the Parkview Methodist School of Nursing with a dwindling enrollment. After much deliberation, the faculty recommended in 1988 that the school be phased out. The last class graduated in 1991. After training its own nurses for nearly a century, Parkview would continue in collaboration with Indiana University, Purdue University at Fort Wayne, which had been an educational partner for the past 30 years.
So economics, professional goals, position statements from various organizations led us to make that recommendation. I did write the recommendation in the proposal that we look at combining our program with IPFW. We had been affiliated with Purdue through IPFW for many, many years, since the early 60s. And that relationship was a very strong, good relationship. Our students took their college courses in non-nursing subjects at the university, and we taught the nursing subjects here. So working very closely with my colleague, the Dean of the School of Nursing, Elaine Cowan at IPFW, we together made a proposal to combine the programs, to kind of take the best of both worlds and make it into a new vital nursing education program. And I'm very happy to say that happened.
The end of the 1980s brought the close of an era. Mark Slen decided to retire after 23 years as leader of Parkview Memorial Hospital. He had served longer than any other hospital CEO in the state of Indiana at the time. From the time Slen took over in 1956, Parkview had almost doubled the number of hospital beds, nearly quadrupled its employee roles, developed the campus far beyond its original 18 acres, and grown into what was then a major medical center and the third largest general hospital in Indiana. The end of Mark Slen's tenure marked a turning point in the history of Parkview. His assistant administrator, David Ritterheim, took over as CEO as the healthcare landscape was rapidly changing.
First job at Parkview, I was personnel director and assistant administrator. At that time, the personnel department consisted of myself, an employment manager, and a clerk. 3 people. I interviewed everybody, signed every single change report. And Mark Slen wanted me to be personnel director because that's how he started. And he said, I think that's the best experience because you really will get to know the heart and soul of a hospital through people. I was blessed too because he saw me, I think, and I thank him for that, as having some potential. So he would giving me more responsibility, more and more. So I rapidly went up the ranks from assistant to associate to administrator to executive vice president, et cetera. He would even intentionally miss a board meeting once a year just so that I'd have the opportunity to sit in his shoes and see, it's not as easy to run a meeting as when I could be back there critiquing what he was doing. He said, okay, wise guy, you do it and see what it's like. So he delegated a great deal, and I think he was able to spend, as each year went by, more and more externally and basically let me run the internal aspect of the hospital.
Gone were the days where a hospital could survive on its own. A hospital management company in Tennessee purchased Fort Wayne's Lutheran Hospital in 1995 as it was developing a chain of hospitals in Indiana. At the same time, Parkview leaders were in conversation with area hospitals about building a locally owned healthcare system servicing Northeast Indiana. By the end of 1995, David Ritterheim became president of the newly formed Parkview Health System, comprised of Fort Wayne's Parkview Hospital, Parkview Huntington Hospital, and Parkview Whitley Hospital. Soon the organization would include Parkview Noble Hospital, Parkview LaGrange Hospital, and Parkview Physicians Group.
But Mark always had a vision, as did Dave Ritterheim, of expanding to adjoining hospitals. And so by the time I became president in '85, we were really seriously looking at various neighboring counties. And then by the early '90s, when Dave Ritterheim, after Mark retired, Dave Ritterheim got in contact with people down in Huntington, Whitley County, Noble County, LaGrange, tried DeKalb, never worked with DeKalb, tried with Stieber, Angola, Cameron Hospital, never worked with those two, but the other 4 counties, we started establishing relationships. And when I was president, and afterwards, we'd invite some of the people from those hospitals to meet with us at various social occasions. And then by '95, we brought in a guy named Charlie Mason as CEO of our new Parkview Health Systems, Inc. And Charlie then really progressed very rapidly with getting in all the Huntington and Whitley and Noble and LaGrange into the fold.
As the region's only not-for-profit hospital system, Parkview has depended on the communities it serves for support, energy, and expertise. Through the years, members of the various hospitals' boards of directors have worked closely with Parkview leadership to make the shared vision of top-quality healthcare a reality.
When I look back to my time as mayor and in working with Mark Slen, working with Dave Ritterheim, all I can think of are positive thoughts. It's again, when there's a smooth working relationship between a corporate entity, not-for-profit or for-profit, hospital or non-hospital. It's when things are moving smoothly, that's when you like it. And that's how it was with Mark Slin, with Dave Ritterheim, with Parkview. Parkview didn't raise problems for the community. Parkview was a positive asset for the community, and both Mark and Dave were people that I could always call on. I knew would be responsive, whether it was making rooms available, whether it was showing facilities to folks that we wanted to attract to the community, whether it was serving on corporate boards. I think both Mark and Dave realized that Parkview would grow if Fort Wayne was growing, and that the stronger the relationship, the better. And they were both people I considered to be friends, people I could call on at any time when there was an issue with the hospital, or actually an issue with other city matters where they might be able to give me some advice. And that's the kind of relationship you want. Same thing with a lot of the staff at Parkview. Folks were always available and willing to help out, and that's what makes for a strong relationship. That's what makes for a strong city.
With Ritterheim now guiding the health system, Dr. Frank Byrne took over as the president of Parkview Hospital in 1995, making him the only physician hospital CEO in Indiana.
I saw how important the hospital was to the whole community as an employer, as for the other corporate citizen roles that we play. And I also learned from Dave Ritterheim, who is obviously still a close friend and somebody I consider one of the most influential mentors in my life, about how you conduct yourself as a leader. And healthcare was getting corporatized, and systems were being formed, and affiliations and bigger systems were coming together. And I thought, somebody who knows what happens in the ICU at 2 o'clock in the morning ought to be involved in making those decisions. And Dave was the type of administrator, one of the case studies I wrote about engaging physicians, where he really viewed physicians as partners, just like Mike Packnett does now.
Looking to the future, as Dr. Franklin had done so many years earlier, Parkview bought land at the northeast edge of the city to allow for future growth. Through its foundations, Parkview has spearheaded a number of community health improvements. In turn, Parkview hospitals have received generous support from those communities for their healing work.